Here's a segment from a recent Gun Talk radio episode. You can listen to all the Gun Talk radio podcasts however you tune in, or check out guntalk.com for more. Okay, we're going to get to this in just a minute, but I just want to touch on this. We're going to have a much more involved conversation in just a few minutes about this. But out of Arvada, Colorado, police officers gets a call for a suspicious person. The bad guy runs up behind this officer as he's walking down the street. Bad guy's got a shotgun. Hollers at the police officer. Police officer turns around, and this monster shoots the police officer dead. Just right there on the street. Got video of it. Nearby, Johnny Hurley is in a store. He's concealed carrying. Johnny hears the shots, and this guy starts shooting up in the air. The bad guy shooting up in the air, shooting out windows in police cruiser. Then this guy goes back into his truck, the bad guy, gets an AR-15. Johnny Hurley grabs his pistol, runs out there, shoots this guy stone, DRT, dead right there. And then Johnny Hurley, the good guy with a gun, who, look, Arvada Sheriff already says his actions were heroic. Hurley's actions were heroic. He saved many lives, according to the sheriff. But a police officer who arrived on the scene sees Hurley holding the AR-15, which I'm sure he took from the ground after he shot this guy. And the police officer shot and killed the good guy with a gun, Johnny Hurley. I want us to remember Johnny Hurley's name. We'll talk about this in some depth in just a few minutes and what we can learn from this. One question I have is, and I don't know the answer to this, okay? What kind of training, if any, do police officers get in the academy about good guys with guns? There are, we don't know exactly, probably 20 million people who have carry permits, and maybe 4 or 5 times that many people who live in states where you're not required to have a permit at all to carry a gun. So you have millions upon millions of people who are carrying loaded guns, and police may run up upon them. And I guess my thought is, running up upon someone who has a gun is not necessarily justification for shooting that person. And yet, look, don't get me wrong, I understand. You're called to a scene, you get there, police officer's down, you got a guy holding a rifle, you're amped up. Even the police here, even the sheriff has called it a tragedy. And then one of our takeaways is, okay, so what do we individually learn from this? We're going to talk about that when we come back on the backside with a top trainer, law enforcement professional, a guy who's trained law enforcement officers. But what should we do? Should we get involved in the first place? Should we intervene in a situation? If so, how do we do it? When the police roll up, what should we do? It's one of those horrible deals. So we talked about that as well. All right, let's keep doing this thing. Tom Gresham here. It's Gun Talk. If you want to be part of this, give me a call. 866-TALK-GUN is pretty easy. A lot of things going on in the news, and of course, we keep trudging along doing the things that we do around here at Gun Talk Central. One of the folks we do a lot of this with these days and having a bunch of fun is Chris Cerino, joins us right now. Hey, Chris, how are you, sir?
Hi, good afternoon, Tom.
Hey, did I see that you're somewhere competing in a match this weekend?
Yeah, just got home. We were out in Pennsylvania shooting a fun match, and we did really well. It was a great time.
What kind of match was it?
It was a 3-gun match, but it was 3-man teams. So there was about 241 people there and 77 teams, and it was a lot of fun. You know how I feel about competitive shooting. I mean, it's a great way to vet your skills because you get out there and you got to hit stuff and you got to do it fast and you got to do it with everybody watching.
Yeah, and the best way to shoot fast is to yank the trigger quickly, right?
Well, you know what I like to do.
What's that?
slap the hell out of it.
Well, and you can do that. Most of us cannot, but you can actually shoot when you do it that way.
Well, it depends on how close the target is and how big it is, but nobody should be slapping their triggers.
No, exactly. We're making fun here for people to understand. You can actually exercise a lot of control over a trigger even when you're shooting fast.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with, well, you know how I feel about grip, sights, and trigger. If you hold the gun right, you can be more aggressive with the trigger, and if you can see the sights with the target beyond, you might as well be pressing the trigger.
Well, there you go. Chris, for those who don't know, is a veteran law enforcement officer, trainer, and also does a lot of stuff with us on our First-Person Defender series, which, by the way, we kick off the new season today, actually this evening. I think the new shows break. And you've been down here in Louisiana working on some of those. Let's talk about that in just a second, but I did ask you to take a quick look at this tragic event in Colorado where you had a monster, a bad guy, went out to murder cops, shot a police officer, killed him. Good guy comes along, shoots him, and kills the bad guy before he can kill a whole bunch of other people. And then, unfortunately, a cop comes along and shoots the good guy. It's just tragic all the way around, isn't it?
Well, you know what? It can. We could sum it up pretty easily, honestly. I mean, there's a lot to be thought about. There's not a lot of video footage out there right now.
Right.
I mean, this is a great case of the good guy with a gun winning the day, doing the right thing. But then ultimately, I mean, he did kill the bad guy, and the bad guy had it coming to him. He just killed a cop. Mm-hmm. But, you know, there's a couple things that people have to think about, okay? Number one is when officers respond to a shooting, let alone the shooting of one of their brothers or sisters, they're coming in hot and they're coming in jacked. I mean, they're going to be jacked up and ready to do whatever needs to get done. And if that means them getting shot themselves, they're going to do it because they're going straight at it. And the good guy, you know, I mean, everything I read about him, he's a super nice guy. He's very conscientious. He did a lot of things right. The problem is he put the bad guy down, and then he picked up the bad guy's AR.
Yep.
All right? So when you're standing around in the public eye with an AR-15 in your hands, you're pretty much an anomaly. You do not fit in that picture.
Especially
you become a target.
Especially when a cop just got killed. There's a cop down. You know, and I'm just thinking, Chris, we talk about this and work on this on the First Person Defender show and we see it. I don't know if it's a TV deal, but we see people all the time in these scenarios, and they're using simunitions. They get all amped up, shoot the bad guy goes down, and then for whatever reason, they want to go over and pick up the bad guy's gun or kick the bad guy's gun away instead of just getting away from the whole thing. Where's this come from?
Well, a lot of stuff comes from TV, and a lot of stuff comes from failure to train. You know, we had a first-person defender scenario back in April that we were filming, and I talked about it, and people will get to watch that. But I talked about it at the end, and I walked past the bad guy on the ground towards the good guy to talk to him, and all I could think at that moment was, geez, I hope that was the right guy. Oh. I knew it was the right guy, but, man, my brain was so conflicted at that time, Tom, and I walked by and I thought, man, we have got to address this.
Yeah.
Because, you know, people like to shoot somebody that has a gun. They like to shoot somebody that has a gun. And, you know, cops like to do the same thing, and especially if they're responding to a shooting call. You know, we trained the teachers. We did stuff like that for years. And, I mean, we talked extensively about what do you do when the shooting's over? You know, hide the gun, sit on the gun, put it under a trash can, tuck it away. If you can get it back in a holster and conceal it, do that. Make sure your hands are visible. You know, you're there, and you should be expected to be treated like the worst person there ever was, and especially if you have a gun in your hand. They have no idea what they're coming into.
And you can't be mad at the cops for wanting to sort it out. They're going to handcuff you until they can get everything figured out and who's the bad guy and everything else. So, but yeah, you're right. In the first moments, those fractions of a second, if you will, even where the cops roll in, there's been a shooting. Maybe there's multiple people shot. You don't want to be the person who's standing there with a gun in your hand, even though you know you're the good guy. They don't know that. No,
nobody knows anything. And there's two tragedies out of this. Number one is a conscientious citizen, armed citizen, got killed. He got killed. And the other tragedy is this officer that responded to this is going to have to live with it for the rest of his or her life, thinking about what could I have done differently. And that's a training issue also with police. I mean, there's training for civilians, there's training for police, and we need to be covering these things. You know, how do we approach this situation? How can we give ourselves the advantage of time and thought? You know, we need time to think. We need to see. We can't just run into stuff. And, I mean, unless there's shots being fired, I hate to say it, I'm gonna slow up. I'm going to start thinking, and I'm going to be ready to shoot somebody, but I'm probably going to say something first, or at least do it from a position of cover.
Right. And yet, you know, as a law enforcement officer and all the different roles that you've had, if a cop got shot and you're called in, like you say, you're coming in hot. Chris, hold on a second here. When we come back, let's talk about some of the scenarios that you've actually done with first-person offender and how we use those to train for those I never thought about that type of moments. We're talking with Chris Cerino. Our number here, 866-TALK-GUN. We'll be right back. Kind of amazing. We're talking with Chris Cerino, of course, city cop, federal law enforcement officer, trainer of cops all over. And Chris, I just popped into our guntalktv.com to look at our videos. The very first one that pops up, not making this up, was Good Samaritan Stops Carjacking in Progress, one that we did.
Oh, boy.
You know, and then the first-person offender, we're 10 seasons, or we're going, I think, maybe going into 11th season on first-person offender, where we take regular people, drop them into self-defense scenarios, and kind of see what they do. And we set it up. I mean, you talk to them ahead of time. You kind of know who they are, what they can do, and you set it up to challenge them, but not to make it impossible, right? Never impossible.
Never impossible. Those last few we filmed over the last couple months have been fantastic. We've had some really great people come in, very thoughtful.
Explain why you say thoughtful as though that's important.
Well, you know, Tom, in the past, we haven't always said stuff, but lately what I've been telling these good guys is act how you would act normally. Be yourself. Try to act how you would react if it were real. Mm-hmm. And those people do so well. The people that are on edge, the people that are jacked up, the people that react too quickly or overreact always get ground up. Because they're jacked up. They know what they got into. They know what they signed up for. They expect it to come, and they telegraph, and it ends up making the scenarios just terrible for them. But the last several we've filmed have been fantastic. The people have been very real. You know, my friend Gib was there this last time, and I was so worried because, you know, I've been training him, and Gib just shined like a diamond, and everybody has been really following suit.
It is part of the kind of training we're talking about, where you actually get into force-on-force training. Part of that is to get you to the point where you need to be where you can manipulate your firearm without having to think about it. And so what you're really doing at a certain point is you're learning to think in the middle of the chaos, and basically you're problem solving, aren't you?
Well, yeah, if your body can go on autopilot and you can handle the situation, it enables your brain to think about what's actually going on, because the body acts while the mind thinks. But if you have to think about what you're going to do and think about what you need to do, you're thinking about what your body's going to do, how you're going to react, and then you're thinking about problem solving. You know, that's like a huge problem, man. It's a problem. It's a tornado of events.
And what we're talking about is you must be at a point where you can draw your firearm, point your firearm, put it out there, aim it, press the trigger, shoot targets, do a reload without having to have conscious thought about it. Is that a fair way to look at it?
Yeah, absolutely. And tell you the truth, we've had some competitive shooters come through, people that say they really love competitive shooting. Mm-hmm. And I hear so much BS about how competitive shooting has nothing to do with self-defense and blah, 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 and yada, yada.
Yeah.
And these guys just rock. The gun comes out, the shots go on target. They're not even thinking about what they're doing with the gun. They're triangulating position. They're giving verbal commands. They're moving to cover. All the things that they need to be doing while the body's on autopilot with the lethal force.
Right. Exactly right. So when people watch first-person defender shows, and by the way, you can watch them on our YouTube channel. You can go to guntalktv.com. It's a really, and it's all free. You can watch all these for free. How do people get the most out of watching this? What should they be looking for?
Well, one of the neat things is we had a guy this last round when I was down there, and he came through and he didn't even have a CCW yet. He had applied for it. It's taken forever because of all the BS with the government offices and whatnot. He said, well, I really haven't had any training. I just went and applied for my CCW permit. But then he said, but I watched like 20 episodes of First Person Defender. And I stopped him and I said, listen, do you realize that is training? And he's like, well, I never really thought of it that way. And I had to explain to him how much training he's actually had by watching these scenarios, by watching the danger cues, by watching people fail, by watching people succeed. That is all training.
You know, and it's the kind of training you're not going to go get out on the square range shooting cardboard targets. It's the, wow, did you see that? It's the, I never thought of that. Or, wow, did you see how fast that happened? Or maybe if you start problem solving and say, well, you know, if he's gone over there and if she hadn't done that, and if she had been a little bit more aware, and all of a sudden you're really raising your awareness to a much higher level.
Right. And you know, the other thing, Tom, and I got to get it in, is people poo-poo us when we're shooting on the range. We're shooting at a piece of cardboard stapled to a stick. Right. It's not moving or shooting back at you. And we're shooting these tight groups, and you got trainers out there that say you shouldn't be shooting such tight groups. You just want to get hits on target. And you can point shoot. You don't need the sights. And one of the guys we had in, he talked about how he kind of just point shoots. You know, he throws the gun out there. I said, well, you know what? You can do that when it's cardboard standing still, not moving or shooting back at you. But as soon as that target goes dynamic, you'll wish to hell you could shoot the tightest group you could, and you'll wish you had trained yourself to get the gun in front of your face between your eyes and the target, because that's what stops the bad guy.
And you just said something there I want everybody to focus on. All this is how do we stop the bad guy from hurting me and other people? That's what all this is about. First Person Defender, it's a great series. Chris, I just want to thank you for what you're doing. Also, where can people keep up with what you're up to online?
Well, they can find me at ChrisCerinoTrainingGroup.com. You can find me on Chris Cerino Training Group at Facebook. And I've canceled all my stuff, but I am starting to schedule some classes. I had some law enforcement agencies, and so that's going to start happening again. You know, I'm going through some tough times, so I had to lay low on training this year.
Yep, exactly right. Glad that you're back at it. Chris Cerino, one of the truly good guys, and when you watch First Person Offender, you'll really get a sense for it. Chris, thank you so much. I appreciate you spending time with us today.
You bet, Tom. Thanks for having me.
All righty, you take care. All right, 866-TALK-GUN. Have you watched FPD? If you have, what have you gotten out of it? All right. We've actually had people say, watching First Person Offender, I think, saved my life. Yeah, it's that good. And yeah, I don't mind blowing our own horns. Check it out.